Yeah, welcome everyone to the Beyond Consulting podcast. Great to have you back, and thanks for listening in. I today have the pleasure of speaking with Martin Bitmead, and he is the director of range space merchandising at Holland and Barrett, the largest wellness retailer in Europe. And we're going to hear more about that, but they have more than 1,000 stores in 18 countries. So it's not a small company. And Martin is basically looking into customer propositions. So he's also been the head of customer propositions at Costa Coffee. Some of the consultants might know that place because they had a lot of coffees, and maybe even at the airport lounges. And also he's been format development director at Woolsey. Martin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Christian. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And Martin, to kick it off, maybe you tell us a bit about yourself. You started as chartered accountant, and so the question for me would be, what drew you into retail strategy and transformation for customer propositions?
Yes, I don't often talk too much about being a chartered accountant, but that was a very, very, very long time ago, Christian. But I think the finance background is a really powerful tool to have in business, and taught me a lot about how to quickly understand and articulate what is going on with a business. However, I very quickly decided it wasn't a direction that I wanted to go into, and I joined a business called Homebase, which is a DIY business, or was just actually gone under, unfortunately, which is very sad. But I started in the sort of finance team, and very quickly, as part of that team, we realized, I was in marketing finance, we realized we wanted to work out what was the best use of our space. Space in Homebase was very tight. There were smaller DIYs. We were up against the giant of B&Q. More about that later. And we wanted to increase our offer to our customers around kitchens and bathrooms, bedrooms. And my job was to find out, how do we do that best? Where could we take the space from? How could we optimize the space? So it was an analytical type of role at that juncture. And as we got into it, we realized there was lots and lots of range and space we could take out, and more proposition we could get to the customer. And that's where I sort of cut my teeth on, we want some new categories in here. What could we put in there? How does it work? Where are we going to place them in the store? And, all the business and operating model associated with that. And then beyond that, really, it was another journey. I then moved across into B&Q, went over to the big giant of DIY and Kingfisher. And as I say, many of my roles have been around stores, store design, future thinking in that space. And then more recently with Holland and Barrett, I've been involved in the digital transformation side, which is a massive piece of work, as most retailers are going through at the moment. How do we optimize that e-com platform? How do we automate it? How do we get personalization across the line? What does that really mean? And lots of thinking in that space.
And can you tell us a bit about, what does it mean to optimize retail space? I mean, most of us probably have been to some DIY store or some furniture store, and you go in and you say, well, it looks cool, doesn't look so cool. You feel at ease, or, but what do you actually do when you optimize the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it starts with the brand. So who is the brand? What are you there to do for your customers? And, from that, if you take a DIY, for example, or even a Holland and Barrett, there are certain products you absolutely have to have because, you're in DIY. So, there are some pretty basic things like paint and paintbrushes, for example, or vitamin D, C, A, B in Holland and Barrett, right? So, we have to work out what the minimum core range is for our customers. And then really it's about the analytical side. It's an art and a science in my mind. The science bit is the data that says, okay, these are the best selling lines. What are the poor selling lines? Are they still relevant to our customers? And then, what type of customers are we really going after? What is the growth? Who are our core, most profitable customers? How do we keep them happy? And, it's the combination of the right product in the right space, in the right stores. So making sure that your range delivers what you stand for as a brand, and then on the fringes of it, then working out, actually, this is costing us too much money from a working capital point of view, or it's not performing, so we'll take it out. We then also look at customers and store clusters. So obviously, for example, Holland and Barrett, we have stores in high streets in very small towns in the UK. We have stores at the bottom of Canary Wharf Tower. They're a very different set of customers, obviously, with very different needs from a wellness point of view. So how do we get the right products in the smaller spaces that we have there for those customers to satisfy those needs, as well as still sticking to our core principles are, we still need the vitamins that cover the core needs of the UK, if that makes sense.
And then help me, it's more like an analytical work, where you always say, like, maybe almost could say there is an algorithm that you kind of, or a procedure that you go through, and you decide this product goes out, another one comes in, or is it more a creative process also where you speak with the customers and you discover the needs? How does that work together to be a customer-centric organization as you are?
That's exactly right. Sorry, I forgot the art bit of the art and the science. So, a lot of the time what you can do if you're optimizing a space is create space to that visual merchandising element, to create content and attraction to the customers, to help them navigate to the right spot within the store, and then B, the system on the purchase, breaking it down, using space to break down the journey to sort of say, these are the highly recommended things, or they're 5-star products. You see a lot of that now in Holland and Barrett, for example. We've been doing that, and and other retailers in beauty, most recommended, or trending on TikTok, these sort of communications in the store that you see that ties in with what's going on digitally, of course, as well. So yeah, that is a very critical part of it. And visual merchandising has a massive role to play. But if you go too analytical, of course, it would never play back. You'd look at it and say, well, what, I've got a piece of card here, or I've got a message here. What is that actually giving you? And of course, it's the balance between, I still need to help the customer and I still need to be customer centric, versus the analytical or the algorithm that would say, well, actually, no, here's the absolute products you should do in the purest form. And then you get into other things, more commercial elements, for example, like what brands I should have, and what is my supplier base providing me in terms of margin, support and funding, and so on and so forth. So there's much more to it than just a pure, what we call assortment ranging, that sort of says, that's your best seller, that's your worst seller, and everything in between.
When you speak about it, it sounds so simple. So,
it's not
you've
simple.
done it at many companies. What makes it actually so tough for companies to have that customer-centric proposition?
I think a lot of the time, particularly in retailers where you are, Holland Barrett's been around for 150 years, or, B&Q the same, that longevity, there's that history of, we've always done this. And I think the challenge, as everybody's talking about in terms of transformation, in terms of, AI and the technology and everything, it's absolutely clearly game changing. And I think, it's difficult sometimes to go, this is where we want to go, this is where we need to go to. What does that actually mean tangibly, realistically? How do you make that meaningful and relevant to the customer? Versus, I've got a business and an operating model that's delivering X% margin on, this many stores, and, it's my bread and butter. That's the cash cow. So the real trick, I believe, to transforming and being more customer centric is really, really, really getting under the skin of that customer proposition. I would say that, wouldn't I? But, what does it actually mean? How does it deliver relevancy, meaningfulness, and most importantly, value to the customer? Why do it? You'll see a lot of concept stores with experiential elements to them, and you take a step back and go, why is that helpful? Is this really, really valid to what you're trying to deliver to the brand? A lot of them clearly are. There's some very, very intelligent people out there, but how does it build personalization? How does it build loyalty? How do you win in that space? Who is it for, and how is it going to deliver on these promises?
You described how ultimately it's about creating value for the customer. And there are a couple of sometimes concepts where you ask yourself, why did they do this? What's actually the value to the customer? My question was, is there a specific example that you can share with us, that highlights how it's been done, or where you implemented that?
Yeah. So when I worked for Wolseley, which for those people who don't know, that it is basically a trade-focused retailer on plumbing, heating engineers, air conditioning, etc., etc. So quite, that end of the market. We did a piece of work which we actually called customer value proposition, and it was, what is the journey of all the different types of customers? Because a plumber is quite different from a heating engineer, who's very different from an aircon. One's more technical than the other, etc. And we mapped that customer journey, and we did a lot of research around what does that customer really want. And we were trying to put the brands together to create. So the financial business case was merge it all together, call it Wolseley, and serve all customers in one, because obviously operationally it's a lot easier. What we learned from that was it wouldn't work, because heating engineers see themselves as more qualified than a plumber, for example. So they don't want to stand behind a plumber in a queue listening to a plumber talking to a member of staff. They want to be respected as a heating engineer and talk to with somebody knowledgeable. Likewise, an aircon guy doesn't want to speak to somebody who's only qualified from a customer service point of view in heating engineer, because you might as well be speaking them in a foreign language. So there was a lot in that, and there was also there's two types of journey. At the beginning of the day, they just want speed. Give me my stuff. I'm out the door. Later on in the afternoon, they're quite happy to have a chat, a cup of coffee, look at a brochure, learn some new stuff. So it was a very, very clearly mapped out course, even down to the day parting bit, which was, okay, we're going to man it this way in the morning and we're going to do it differently in the afternoon. And it taught us an awful lot about what was really, really important to the customer in their mindset, days of the week, time of the day, which queue to go into, who to talk to. Some of them would say, I know Christian behind the counter. He's my man. I don't want to talk to anybody else because he knows my business, for example. It really, really important, really mattered to them. So we had to try and find a way to make that work from a customer service point of view.
Interesting. And so it's basically, catering almost like in a retailer to the individual need of those people. I mean, somewhat, if you say there are those trends, individualization, customization, it's, more geared towards the individual. Would you say we're moving towards a market of one, where kind of every customer getting his own proposition in the future, or will you still be thinking around customer groups?
I think that's a really great question. I think the operation. So right now, until I guess AI and the technology allows us to really push that, I think there's a balance between the operating model, the complexity involved with individual personalization versus, let's say, customer groups. Customer groups is the first stage on that journey. Can you go further? Yes, but it massively depends on your customer data and your tools and so on and so forth, right? And I think personalization is an interesting term at the moment. And as I say, I think it should be challenged around what's the meaning of it and what's the value to it. But if you take Holland & Barrett, for example, the journey that we are striving to offer our customer is, our customer comes into our store or goes online. We have a consultation. We perhaps run some tests, blood tests. And again, we're not there yet. These are just starting, we start to offer a simple solution to a customer. It can be a test at home. It can be a test in the store. It can be whatever. And through a conversation or a consultation, we would provide you with a personalized recommendation on your wellness needs. So what vitamins, what supplements you need. Again, if you're interested in certain sports or certain activities, what is it that you need? So that would be a personalized package or subscription or what have you, or even just a list of these are the products that you need. But, again, I think in that case, you can be individual, and that sounds achievable, right? I mean, that's not particularly difficult because it's medically driven or scientifically driven. I think in other retailers and other industries, that becomes a lot harder. Going back to the DIY and the trade bit, a lot of that personalization, yes, it's about product. It's about the deal. It's about the discount you give them, or you're seen to give them, and it's about that conversation. So it's a completely different need set that you need to tailor. So I think, again, it depends on the area that you're in, whether you're going to be individually personalized or more of a group approach right now.
That's right. I hear you saying it depends a bit on the product and the business model also that you
Yeah.
have,
And
of
the customer
course,
need as well, right?
and the customer need, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
And now you've seen a lot of companies, you have supported a lot of transformation programs. Yeah.
Mhm.
If you reflect on that, and like, what is the thing that companies get wrong when they, or struggle wrong, maybe is a too strong word, but what
Yeah.
do they struggle with when they start on those transformation programs, becoming more customer centric? Where can consultants maybe also help them, yeah,
Yeah.
in bridging those capability gaps? What's your take on that?
I think for me, being boring and being a retailer, it always starts with the customer. Okay, so we've talked a lot about customer journey. We've talked about personalization, etc. But I think, laying out what is it that you want to be for your customer, and where does your brand stand for now? Where is it winning? Where is it losing? What's the stretch that you're aiming for, etc., is really, really critical. And as I said before, the value proposition work that we did in Wolseley was so detailed. And I think that's really, really critical. I think that's the bit that many, many businesses miss. So what does it mean for Christian? What does it mean for Martin? What does it take those customer groups and drive it right down to the minutiae, because that's what's important around, why would they come back? How are you going to make them loyal customers? What are you going to offer them? How are you going to take that offer so it's meaningful to me? There's no point giving me a voucher for, I don't know, protein powder if I don't do sports, for example. There are ways and means, and it's pulling every lever, the pricing, the promotion, etc., etc. But I think then the other really, really key bit in that space is, what does this mean for our business and our operating model? Because I think a lot of businesses go off without considering that the end
Can you
state.
make an example? Like what do you mean? Like the end state, it gets too complex, or what would be an example for not considering the operational
Let's be
implications?
crazy with Holland and Barrett for a minute, right? We've got 1,000 stores. We've got 800 in the UK. Currently, the split is about 80-20. 80% of our sales go through the stores. In 20 years' time, in 10 years' time, what's the number of stores going to be? I have no idea, right? But you would assume and you'd expect probably that the digital offer is going to drive a higher percentage at some point. So what does that mean? Because our margins online are different. The business model for an online business, obviously, is different. So what does that all mean? So, and if you want to go down the route of personalized subscriptions, as I've described earlier, that's game changing and very different. You need a bigger warehouse. You need this. You need, you need automation coming out your eyeballs. It's kind of like, what does that all mean? And then, so that might be the end state that you could take a shot at, but it's the journey towards it that's important too. So if that's a 5-year or a 10-year timescale, what does that mean for my operating model year 1, year 2, year 3? Because it has to change. And I think that's the bit that many businesses miss, that say, okay, here's my sales budget and my margin budget, but actually operationally, what does that investment look like? And I still need to hit a certain number. So how do I optimize my financials or my costs and my margins or what have you? I think that bit often gets left behind. So I think the vision and the detail on the vision is really critical. The operating model and the change in the operating model on that journey is often misunderstood and poorly considered. Forecasting and like I say, the financial optimization. And I think that's really the third one is the people. So for me, transformation, I've seen, done as a rah, we're transforming the business. It's terribly exciting. And I've seen it done as it's a bit of a dirty word, so you have to build a culture, and you have to kind of like understand how and who is going to get you there, if that makes sense. So, we're often business will set up a PMO and get in a change team and do this, that, and the other. Okay, fine. But Christian or Martin have got to do the work. So how does that how do you get that into the right space? And I think, innovation versus efficiency is really important, versus cost. How far are you pushing it, and have you got the right talent? People talk about it all the time. The other one for me is objectives and alignment. a lot of businesses still work in silos. So have you got transformation objectives, and do they align? Are you all pulling in the same direction on transformation whilst running the
Yeah,
business?
and I feel like a lot of clients, of course, they want to move. They have a vision or at least some idea where they want to move. I think everyone has. Yeah. Now, I imagine it's quite difficult when you say, okay, we don't know how the future is going to look like. Yeah. You don't know how many stores going to be there. Is it all online? Is it a mix? Are there new concepts? Even I don't know. The drones are bringing things to the places at home. So how will the future be looking like? And unless you have that very clear end picture described, why move? Because it's going to change anyways. So how do you create this starting point, where everyone is like, okay, we start moving. We maybe don't know 100% how it's going to look like and how it's going to come out also in the end, but we start moving.
Mm. Well, I think that's why would a consultant be pulled in for a transformation conversation anyway? As we all know, the world is changing so much that these businesses need to transform. And I think the route into that is the do nothing scenario, which any consultant would probably say. Well, actually, you can't stand still. You know, Amazon and the grocers, etc., will always come and eat your lunch. They'll be looking at these margins and coming after you. So it's not going to stay. It cannot stay the same, and it will not stay the same. And I think it's not necessarily about being perfect from the start, but I think you have to understand the journey, or at least have a journey set out to say this is a 5-year gig, or it's a 10-year gig, or it's a 2-year gig. But we don't know what the answer is, but we do know, and we do know that we want to be roughly here in a year's or two's time, and we are going to put into place a structure and the capability that as we start that journey, we're tracking it, we're monitoring it, we understand what our KPIs and our objectives are, and we can course correct if that is necessary.
And in this journey, where can consultants play a role from your experience?
I think, as I've sort of mentioned already, that the upfront piece about the customer, who is the customer, who we're going after, how we're going to make the money, etc., is really, really important. And trying to assist a business to pull the data sources that it has, for example, and demonstrate the ones that are missing, to say, this is what we know today. This is as much as we know today, and you need to go and fix A, B, and C to get proper loyalty data or what have you. I think that's absolutely huge. I think that projection of the business model and how it will change is critical. And again, I have not seen a good example in any of the transformations I've been involved in terms of, all right, okay, so we do need to invest here, and what does that mean for our retail versus our digital mix? And then I think the organizational stuff we've talked about briefly. Have we got the right talent, capability, and structure and culture, leadership alignment, KPIs, all of that good stuff. And then I think the other one is really around, which is sort of bread and butter of most strategic consultants, around brand purpose, values. Where's the stretch? How can we differentiate? How are we going to win against our competitors? What's our growth strategy? Other partnerships, joint ventures, M&A? Do we want to go and acquire anybody? Things like sustainability. How is that relevant? How do we make this brand inclusive in the modern age?
Martin, thanks a lot. If there would be, now thinking, we covered a lot of topics, so thinking about them, if you had to give only one advice to our listeners who are leaders in a lot of transformation programs, what would it be? One advice to become more customer-centric?
I think, it's a great question. I think for me, it's about marrying together what we talked about, the customer value proposition. What are those customers and what do they need, with the USP of this business? That's the real strategic bit of, how are we going to create that hook for our customers and create loyal customers, and what do they want? And if you can marry those together, I think that's probably when you're in a real winning space from this is going to drive a real point of difference, a real meaningful, relevant point of difference for our customers.
Martin, thanks a lot. I hope a lot of our listeners can do that marriage with the USPs and their customers. Thanks for being part of the show today, and thanks for joining.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.